So I was given this title because it is a significant topic that we're dealing with, and we will deal with right throughout the whole conference. And I'm going to try and give you some insights from some of the work that we've been doing in this space. So there's a definition there which you pull off the web, that's fine. It has to be said that I think it's a little bit too narrow for the conversations that we need to have. So it's television and radio services that are unencrypted. The classic definition is unencrypted. It also focuses on terrestrial radio and television, which is a rather UK-centric view. Terrestrial dominates in terms of a free-to-air platform in a lot of European countries. But the country in which I live, which is not Ireland, by the way, the country in which I live, the dominant free-to-air platform is satellite, as it is in Germany and Austria. And the other thing is that we build into this the concept of what's called free-to-view, which is content which is free to view in the sense that you can watch it, but it's not delivered free-to-air for various rights reasons. A lot of the content is encrypted for geographical purposes. So, I suppose the question I'm going to try and answer to you answer today is free-to-air television dead? And to cut it short, I hope not. I don't know, but I hope not. So, some aspects that we might consider in this debate. Public service media, which is an organization or a movement that I represent. The European Broadcasting Union is the largest association of public service media organizations in the world. We're very active in a number of different domains, one of which is sports rights, and I'll be speaking in a session later on about that. And by and large, Europeans, and I include in this European definition colleagues in the UK, like and trust public service media. There's a whole pile of stuff that goes with that that we can use to support those figures, but by and large, we like and trust public service media. We're not happy to pay for it, though, but that's okay because it's free to air. It is funded, however, and it's funded in a variety of different ways. It's funded, first of all, by public service media, and in any case, is funded by a license fee or something similar, or and there is a movement away from this license fee in some territories, and I think in particularly France, which I'll deal with in a second. And that movement away is heading towards taxation and central government funding. There is also advertising, and the advertising funds a substantial proportion of free-to-air television. We'll deal with some of that later on, and again, that's the subject of many of the sessions here. The other thing is that we need to consider is free-to-air television is the core proposition that comes with a horizontal market. And what I mean by a horizontal market is you or the people you serve going out to the consumer electronics shop or going to a website, purchasing essentially what is a piece of furniture, bringing it back home, connecting it to a TV set, and enjoying then what they connecting it to a network and enjoying what they see. Frankly, the companies that sell us TV sets are very poor manufacturers of furniture. And if their core proposition is you switch on the TV and nothing happens until you start paying fees, and then that changes the concept of the horizontal market that we have become used to over several years. And by the way, it's a fine market. So the other thing is that customers used to interact through a vendor-specific electronic program guide, and we note that is evolving, which I'll get to in a minute, is evolving into one that's driven through recommendations, suggestions, bringing with it a whole pile of issues. Now, we also note that live viewing, they don't bounce, by the way, live viewing is competing with on-demand viewing, and I the point I would make is that and I had to watch daytime TV a couple of times because I was trying to do stuff. Daytime TV is really hard to watch. I don't know if anybody's figured that out yet. And no wonder everybody's driven to on-demand services, unfortunately. Right, anyway, so free-to-air funding, and this is a topic which I will provide comments on, but I need to be careful because there aren't necessarily the comments associated with my own organization. With the increased popularity of video on demand, either subscription video on demand or advertising supported on demand services, the traditional license fees that PSM has been relying on are starting to come under pressure. There's a whole pile of issues associated around this, and we see some markets, and France is the latest one to move to a more centralized funding regime. That brings with it a certain amount of certainty in respect of funding for free-to-air television, but it also brings with it the need for these organizations to be much more politically active than they might like to have, they might like to be. It's unfortunate, but that's just the way it is. Also the thing is that the advertising-funded traditional free-to-air broadcasters are having enormous difficulty in replicating the revenues that they enjoy in their linear broadcast services with live stream services that they may like to transition their customers to. So the advertising model on which they base their revenues is something that's coming under extreme pressure, and you need to be really innovative to continue to make all that work. That's not saying that they don't, and I'm sure there's sessions here which will discuss in much detail how you can make how you can make that transition happen. Addressable advertising key, of course, in that space. And the other thing is, and we've heard about it in the last presentation and right throughout the conference, FAST is advertising-supported streaming services are a key trend in the industry, and there's an enormous presentation from our colleagues in Samsung, a sponsor, outside, which you can have a look at. The other thing to note, and this is perhaps flying under the radar to an extent, is that there is a trend in the industry also for the sporting federations to promote direct-to-consumer subscription services, bypassing paid television operators in some cases, facilitated by the FAST platforms, facilitated by the proliferation of various aggregators. Now, that is something where the free-to-air broadcasters, or the traditional free-to-air broadcasters, can provide a lot of the infrastructure necessary to do that. And there are a couple of examples of how that is being done from my own country, actually, as it happens. So how do customers interact with free-to-air television platforms? I'll skip through this because we discussed this earlier on today. Customers interact through an EPG. Yes, they can. That EPG is evolving for sure. And it's targeting customers that are rather older in age than younger in age, the traditional EPG thing. Customers also interact through aggregator portals. Now, interestingly, the aggregator portals may be free to air in themselves, or they may be the broadcaster's own applications that are delivered on TV sets. It could be the vendor's UI itself, and it could also be, in fairness, the subscription video on demand suppliers. Although they're not free-to-air television, the free-to-air television providers need to have a foothold in that space in order to make their own proposition function right across the spectrum. Now, the other thing is that linear free-to-air channels are also driving on-demand services. So I'll have a free-to-air Barker channel, which essentially, whose essential purpose is to drive on-demand, subscription on-demand services through the linear EPG. And that's suggesting that linear channels are still valuable. Linear free-to-air channels are also valuable in terms of driving content usage. It's a way into the realm of the paid television environment. So the other thing to note in this space is that how the viewer interacts with the service provider and how the user interface is defined and how we address issues such as prominence, promotions and recommendations is a really significant topic at the moment. And it's one where as we heard in a previous session here, the regulatory community is very active in terms of trying to manage the experience for customers that simply don't know what is happening to the user interface that they're using in order to access their programming. So in a free-to-air market, how you determine what channels appear where, how they appear, is something which is relatively opaque at the moment, and it is something where the regulatory community is very active. So I think the point to make, and this is a point that was made earlier on, but I think it's important to stress, is that we need to be clear that free-to-air does not equal access via an electronic program guide. It can be done via other means, and there are very successful free-to-air platforms that are not necessarily based on the vendor-specific electronic program guides. So I work in the standardization sector. I do a lot of other stuff as well, but that's one of the reasons I'm here. And so the HBB-TV Association has an operator application which is quite popular, particularly in the UK market. And this allows for a horizontal approach to specific applications with certain privileges that run on the TV set that essentially take over some of the user interface features and make it look like something that is more controlled by a more vertically integrated platform, but in a horizontal manner, which is paradoxical. And the other thing is there's a DVB standard which is used for terrestrial and satellite broadcasting here. And we've developed a way in which we can merge the satellite, terrestrial, and live stream service experience in a seamless manner for the consumer. And that is something which a number of the classic DTT and satellite operators are looking at as a way of merging these live streamed and live broadcast experiences. So is the traditional horizontal television market still relevant? I would argue yes, even in this difficult environment, but it is a minefield for those that are trying to regulate it because it's an extremely complex area at the coalface, shall we say, of the convergence debate. So the question I would ask again is, I don't think it's dead. In free-to-air television is just fine. It's just very different to what we would have experienced 10 years ago or so. I don't know what your views would be. So thanks very much. That's me. I have 1 minute 55 seconds left for questions. So if anybody has a question, happy to take it. If you could just, before you ask the question, raise your hand, stand up, and tell us who you are. That would be really helpful. And if that's a barrier to you, then you don't have to tell us who you are. Any questions? Yes, question over here.
Yeah, thank you. Ed Ludlow from Omdia. I have a question regarding, in particular, FAST. We've heard a lot about it at this conference, and it's in particular in the UK, because to access a FAST channel as a subscriber or as a consumer, you need a television license. And I just wonder how you think that impacts the value proposition of FAST in the UK and what regulatory implications that will have as well.
So that's an interesting and really difficult question. The short answer is I don't know. Indeed, the television license and the television and radio license I'm used to is something which is applied right across the board. There are views that say that the FAST TV services should fall outside the remit of the television license because it's not the same thing. In the country in which I live, Switzerland, the television license fee is focused on households with reception devices, regardless of what's on that reception device. So I don't know. That's a hard one to call. I wouldn't want to call it here because if I do, I'll get it wrong. Sorry about that. So I'd like to say thanks very much indeed for your attention. I think we're bang-ish on time. I'd like to, thank you very much, and I'll pass back to you. Yeah.
Thank you, Peter.